Well, the Prime Minister is now in India. He's just arrived in New Delhi for a whistle-stop 48-hour trip for the G20 summit. He has a bilateral with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi tomorrow, in the hope of securing a long-coveted post-Brexit trade agreement. However, it's climate change that is expected to dominate the talks. Well, our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen, is in New Delhi, travelling with the Prime Minister for this G20 summit. And Tamara, I guess first and foremost, from the Prime Minister's perspective, what is he aiming to do on this trip? Is it a big global gathering where they'll be talking about global issues, or is it more his bilateral with Narendra Modi?
Morning. Well, I think it's important for a number of reasons. Rishi Sunak, who's just arrived here in Delhi, he was greeted off the plane by senior government officials, has just tweeted saying that he's at the G20 summit to help stabilise the global economy, build international relationships and support the most vulnerable. So the G20 summit itself kicks off tomorrow. But beyond that, I think there's a couple of other key aims. At the G20, there will be a lot of divisions exposed by one of the biggest economic issues overshadowing the whole thing, which is, of course, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the fact that the Indian hosts here and China, who are also attending the summit, don't want to condemn that invasion. So we'll see whether the G20 leaders, who normally issue a joint statement at the end of the meeting, can actually find very much to agree on. But for Rishi Sunak, there are two other important reasons. First, there's just the symbolism of a Prime Minister of Indian heritage coming for his first visit here as Prime Minister. He said to us on the plane last night that he hadn't been here in a few years, but that India is special for him, that it's near and dear to him, and that he was amused to hear that he's been referred to by commentators here as India's son-in-law, perhaps a reference to his wife's father, who's, of course, a very wealthy businessman here. But this is a special place for him, and it's clear that he thinks that the relationship that the UK should have with India is special, and key to that is securing a trade deal. Now, this has been talked about for some time. You may remember Boris Johnson said last year it would be done by Diwali, which was in October of 2022. So that date came and went. We know that they've been through 12 rounds of negotiations. There's a lot of difficult issues to resolve. And Rishi Sunak told us yesterday that it wasn't a given that they would be resolved. So he as good as told us that it won't be done on this trip. But his meeting with Prime Minister Modi, which is happening tomorrow, might be key to seeing whether a breakthrough can be made later in the year, because we understand that there is discussion in Downing Street about whether he can come back later in the year if there is progress made. One of the sticking points we know is visas for Indian business people and assurances for Indian students in the UK. Rishi Sunak made clear, aware of the views of the Conservative right, that the immigration system is not going to be changed. The points-based immigration system remains, but the feeling is in government that there may be some tweaks that can be made around that. So I think key visit to see whether progress can be made on a trade deal and whether the cracks between the major powers on Russia are as stark as ever.
Tamara, there's also, of course, focus on who's not going to be there. It was only a week or so ago that the rumour mill was suggesting the Prime Minister might have a bilateral with the Chinese president, but of course that won't be happening.
Yes, Xi Jinping is not coming to this summit, which is interesting in itself, because he did leave China to go to the BRICS summit of emerging economies. But they are sending Li Qiang, the Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak didn't rule out having a meeting with him. There's nothing in the diary at the moment, but he did not use any confrontational language towards China when we asked him. He said he would welcome any country, including China, at this AI summit he's trying to organise. And clearly, climate change is high on the agenda here. And the world battle against climate change is having China on side with that is going to be key. So we will wait to see whether they have any talks together. But also not here, of course, is Vladimir Putin. He is still in the G20, and Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, will be here in his place. Now, the Prime Minister's spokesman said to us that if the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, had a chance in sessions to make it clear to Lavrov's face what the UK thinks of Ukraine's invasion, he will do. We don't know whether he'll get that chance. There's no set piece moment planned, but certainly it'll be interesting to see whether they encounter each other and, of course, how Western leaders leaders treat him and what they say to him at this summit?